Did you want to hear everyone singing?
Roughly wants to be the
Okay, if delegates could take their seats, we'll get started in the next minute. Is that on, Patty? Okay, delegate. Yeah. Delegates, the sooner we get settled down and get started, the sooner we'll conclude the business of conference. So if everybody could take their seats, please. And I've been asked by the hotel if anybody is staying in this hotel, can you make sure that you have checked out by no later than 11 o'clock and earlier if possible. Okay, thanks very much. So. Okay, delegates, I hope you all had a good conference yesterday and that you enjoyed your evening, whatever you did, after 5:30 last night and 9:30 this morning. In the interest of time, I would again ask people if they could stick to their 4 and 3 minutes. And the Trade Union Friends of Palestine meeting, and there's a circular on the tables. Now, it might start a bit before 1. That'll be for those who are organising the fringe, because I think maybe they have people zooming in, but we'll make an announcement about that towards the end of conference. So I want to call on Francie Devine from the Irish Labour History Society to speak to conference. You're very welcome, Francie.
How do I do this, by the way?
Sisters and brothers, I'm delighted.
Sorry. Okay. Oh, I would if I knew how to do it. Sorry about this, folks. No. Here we are. Okay, good morning, comrades and friends. I've been asked to give a very brief presentation on the Irish Labour History Society, which next year celebrates its 50th anniversary. Quite a lot of slides here, and I'm going to go through them if I can get this to work. Here we are. I'm going to flash these up very quickly for all sorts of reasons, including obviously time, but just to give an impression that you are representative of a movement with a very long and interesting history, but a history that to a considerable extent is neglected or not known. I'm dedicating the talk to 2 women, one of whom on the left there, Betty Sinclair, who was for years the Secretary of Belfast and District Trades Union Council, whose centenary is coming up shortly, I believe on the 3rd of December. A headstone is being erected on her grave in Carnmoney. And on the right, Inez McCormick, probably the most famous and celebrated, both here and internationally, female trade union leader and innovator in terms of organisation methods and campaigning and involving communities. We were founded in 1973. We publish an annual journal called Seha, Seha being the Irish word for work in the sense of craft, or Seha Namach, the work of bees. We have an archive and museum in Beggars Bush in Dublin, and the main priority is to preserve the records and history of the Irish working class. The website, which has recently been updated, is worth a visit. Our founder was John Swift. If there's anybody here from the Bakery and Food Workers Union, John was a Dublin baker and a brilliant man. And on the right, one of our key figures was the late Donal Nevin, General Secretary for many years of the ICTU. We have individual and trade union membership. In fact, we're one of the largest history society, labour history societies in the world, believe it or not. And almost all of our members are people like yourselves. We do have academics and historians and stuff in membership, but it's mostly ordinary working people. And we relied significantly on the affiliation of trade unions. And if your union is not on this list, my apologies, but most unions here are affiliated, including Belfast and District Trades Council, and indeed Enniskillen Trades Council. You can join as an individual or affiliate your union or branch, and you can do that through the little web address at the bottom. And for that, obviously, apart from staying in contact with the society, you get copies of the journal. 2 other significant figures were Joe Deasy on the left, who was a TSSA member in Dublin, and the late Miriam Daly, who was killed, unfortunately, here in Belfast. She was a lecturer from Queen's. Our big event next year to celebrate the 50th anniversary, and one of the main reasons for me standing here, we're holding an international conference in Dublin on Thursday to the Sunday, the 14th to the 17th of September, called Visions of Labour and Class in Ireland and Europe, 1973 to 23. And we're encouraging people to attend that conference as individuals or indeed to seek affiliation, delegate status through your union or your branch. All sorts of speakers are present from all parts of Ireland. The keynote addresses are by Marcel van der Linden from Holland, who's going to be talking about labour and class in the last 50 years, and the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins. But there's much more, and people like Paddy, etc., will be speaking and representing unions here. These are some of the publications of the ILHS on the left there. As I look at it, the history of Thomas Johnson, the first leader of the Labour Party in the Republic, or the Free State as it was, who spent some time here in Belfast and was a member of Belfast Trades Council. And on the right, a biography of a man some of you would be very familiar with, either as the General Secretary of ICTU or indeed a League of Ireland referee, where you've probably given him a boo, as I have the few times. And that's our annual journal, Seha. Also out on the stand, we've got Umiscon Press publications, and I'll go through these very quickly given time. Founded by Jack McGinley on the left there, who was for a number of years on the Standing Orders Committee of Congress and on the executive of ICTU. Among the publications, one I'd strongly recommend is Jim Quinn, who's with us, who did a centenary history of Fermanagh and District Trades Council. Terrific little book, and there are badges from the centenary of the Trades Council available outside. Jimmy's given them away. And on the right, Stephen McGonigal, who would be, get this right, your uncle? Grandfather, my apologies. And this was written by Stephen's uncle, Owen. And Stephen McGonigal was from Derry, an ITGW and Clothing Workers Union representative, the first ombudsman here in the north of Ireland. And when you look at his manifesto for independent labour in Derry in the 1940s, and you read the terms of the Good Friday Agreement in terms of its social context, you'll realise how far ahead of his time he was. This is Jim and Jim Brown from the Amalgamated. There's the badge. Sorry, go through. This is again Jim Brown, one of the great heroes of the working class movement here in Enniskillen. And this was a recent event in the Roundel Park where the branch put up a new monument to workers who lost their lives in the course of work. And there, the handsome one on the left is Jim Quinn. And the rather ugly one on the right is Sean Byers of Trademark. He told me to say that. And there's Jack McGinley at the presentation. One of the best books outside, we celebrated the centenary of William Walker, who in 2018. Walker was a woodworkers official. He was, believe it or not, at one stage chairman of the British Labour Party, and was responsible for the only occasion when the British Labour Party held its annual conference in Ireland, which was in Belfast in 1907. Jim Larkin, incidentally, appearing for the first time in Ireland as a delegate at that. And we both had a biography by Mike Meacham, absolutely terrific piece of work. He's discovered huge amounts of material on Meacham, and Sean and myself put together a book of essays on William Walker, which includes profiles of people like the wonderful Anna McGonigal from OMA, the NIPSA stroke unison lady. Yeah, she deserves it. Great woman altogether. This is some of the indications of Walker, who is president of Congress in Kilkenny, but he also was one of the people first responsible through the Belfast Trades Council to organise women workers, and the Textile Operative Society of Ireland came out of that. So again, he was ahead of his time. This is the banner that was made by the Amalgamated Society of Woodworkers. Here it is on the right of the Belfast May Day Parade. Sharp-eyed amongst you will recognise the woman in the white there is Linda Walker, who many of you know. And here again is the ASW banner for Belfast on the left. I'm a ICTU member, so I had to stick Connolly up for Timmy Smith and the boys. And here again is a picture of Walker, and of course, just to give you the Belfast Trades Council, one of the oldest extant trades councils. This NILP banner I found in Manchester, which something maybe we should be doing is getting that banner back to where it belongs in the Ulster Museum or somewhere like that, but it's the Northern Ireland Labour Party banner. And the more recent books are a biography of T.J. O'Connell, who was one of the outstanding leaders of the INTO, the Teachers Union, and the leader of the Labour Party in Dáil Éireann very briefly. And one of the collections of essays was on communist lives, myself and a guy from Newry called Pat Smiley. And that book again contains biographies. You'll see a few of the people here. Here she is, Anna McGonigal, with her president's badge. Great stuff to see a dinner lady president of a union with 1 million members. Great stuff. Madge Davison on the left, Edwina Stewart in the middle, and the late Sean Morrissey from the Amalgamated on the right, all people who feature in the book of essays on the CP. Here is the granddad, Stephen McGonigal on the left-hand side, and you'll recognise Paddy Devlin there, and just picking up the Belfast people, Joe Meehan and Joe McBrinn, Liam McBrinn from the Amalgamated's father on the right-hand side. Two other people that feature are Andy Boyd, one of the founding figures of Labour history. His book, The Rise of the Irish Trade Unions is still available in print and still worth reading. And a very close friend of mine, Jim McFall, who became General Secretary of the Boilermakers in a most unusual competition because he beat Sandy Scott, perhaps the only time in history that two Belfast men contested the leadership of a British-based union. And Jimmy McFall from York Street won it. And this is the most recent book. We looked at Labour outside of Belfast and Dublin in the revolutionary period. Sean Byers, Fergal McCluskey was my co-editor. And this looks at things like the Red Triangle, the activity in the Mid-Ulster region, Lurgan, Lisbon, Portadown district. You'd be surprised at how radical the movement was. And that leads to different sides of the equation. On the left-hand side, Andrews, who was Minister for Labour, a member of the Ulster Unionist Labour Association, and Tommy Henderson from the Shankill, who became the High Sheriff of Belfast. So they went in one path through the Labour movement. On the other hand, we have people whose names I think deserve to be remembered. Henry Cummins and Willie O'Neill, Secretary of the Lurgan Weavers and Winders, very radical, very left-wing, looking for a sort of a welfare state way before it happened. Georgie Gregg, Belfast Walkerite from the National Amalgamated Union of Labour, and Jack McIlvogue from Dungannon. A man that I was particularly interested in was Billy Venard, or William Venard from Portadown, an Anglican, an Orange man, a railway worker who later on became an official of the NUR and later the Transport Union, who stood for, again, a socialist vision of Ireland, be it divided or otherwise, a forgotten figure, but a terrific man. I'll just flip past that one very quickly, just for the sake of time, just to go back, sorry. The guy you'll recognize, if I can get him up, sorry, is our current president, Shay Cody. Many of you will know him as the recently retired General Secretary of FORSA. That's the museum. This is the first of the web pages. You can, as I say, join or renew your membership. These are the records that we have. They are of national importance, and they include records from the whole parts of Ireland. Many unions have made their deposits, and if any of you are changing offices or whatever, please let us know, because we can arrange for records to be preserved either in Dublin or in association with the PRO&I or other organisations here in the north. Our conference, again, to conclude, is going to be in September 2023. It's going to be a tremendous event, but there's probably going to be a few hundred delegates at it, but as an opportunity to understand your past in order to inform your future. Comrades, we need education, agitation to organise. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Francie, for that gallop through the history there. And I would recommend, having attended one of the conferences, I think a couple of years ago, or certainly pre-COVID, I would commend, if you're in the Dublin area, to go to the museum, because it's extremely interesting and informative. Okay, if we could move on then back into the motions, and I'll call on the speaker from NUJ for motion 23. Thank you.
Anton McCabe, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Anton McCabe, National Union of Journalists. I will be brief, angry and bitter. Social media has become a sewer of vile abuse. Owners, such as the repulsive Elon Musk, profit from this. We are proposing this motion as a union, not because we see journalists as special. It's because of the nature of our job. Our members need to be on social media. It's a platform and it's a means of contact for them. This is not words. This is vile abuse. This is a form of violence against women, because trolling abuse is particularly directed at women. Too many members of our union have been driven to the end of their tether by abuse. For example, a member of our union, Patricia Devlin, faced a threat to rape her baby son on Twitter. The late Twitter allowed anonymous accounts to troll viciously the late Lyra McKee. This is, of course, not just at journalists, it's at trade unionists, at political representatives, young people, but we have to say, tragically, particularly at women. It has driven people from social media. The police response has improved, still has a long way to go. We must, as trade unionists, our first duty is to encourage people to stand up, encourage people to complain, encourage people to say, no, this is not part of your job. No, this is not just ordinary banter. This is a form of misogynistic violence. We need to give people the confidence and support to report. As trade unionists, we're also fighting to democratize social media, how to use it. Social media is of great use to the trade union movement for contact, for getting our message out there. However, too often it has become a means of causing distress to our members, particularly to our women members. And the model of ownership allows profit before responsibility. These social media company owners are allowed to inflict misery on our members, on trade unionists, on young people, operating with the lightest of touch, but to suck the maximum of profit from encouraging abuse, from encouraging misogyny. That is not acceptable. Thank you, sisters and brothers.
Okay, thank you, Anton.
I'm Mary from Equity, and I'm here to speak to support this motion. Performers are frequently exposed to online abuse, bullying, harassment, and potentially career-ending and life-threatening remarks associated not with their craft, but about what they stand for as human beings in general. Misogynistic statements about appearance are frequent, and as I mentioned earlier, unsolicited dick pics and stalking. And more recently, we've had in our industry LGBTQ brothers and sisters being targeted with dangerous commentary and false accusations that left them fearing for their safety. Artists providing drag time stories suffered scandalous abuse this year. Here in Northern Ireland, a former TUV councillor had to be threatened sentencing from the courts before they took down a video that targeted the artists involved. This harassment led to the artist being falsely accused of paedophilia simply because of the style of their work. And this has led to this artist receiving terrifying death threats online. This lasted for months, and as you can imagine, the artist is still living with the consequences of this TUV councillor's abusive actions. We need tools to counter online abuse. We need support to take action when it happens, and we need the online world to be a safe space, just as we campaign for this on our sets and in our studios and in our theatres. We support.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary. Any other speakers? If there's no other speakers, I'll put motion number 23 to conference. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That motion's unanimously carried. Okay, if we then call on the mover of motion 24 in the name of NIPSA.
Chair Conference, Padraig Mulholland speaking in the name of NIPSA on motion 24, asking for your support. Comrades, I think it is appropriate that at a certain point we as a movement begin to draw up the balance sheet of the COVID experience. And I think our starting point should be to say, for us as trade unionists, for working class people, war, recession and pandemics are a crisis. But we should also remember that war, recession and pandemics are an opportunity for capitalism. It is an opportunity to have a bonanza of profit gouging. It's an opportunity to rob the public purse. It's an opportunity to fatten offshore bank accounts. And it is an opportunity to introduce new legislation that can be used repressively against working class people and working class organisations. And comrades, what has the experience been? During the COVID process, we should remember that the Health and Safety Agency and other established agencies were pushed to one side. Overnight, they became powerless. Those who should have raised their voices for the public good were silenced in the name of political expediency. Legislation was introduced, it was passed, but what was its purpose? Its purpose was not to protect public health, rather its purpose was to allow control of working class people, while at the same time the ruling class had free rein to operate in any way that they liked. So comrades, some examples of this, and there are direct examples. In Debenhams in the south, the workers in Debenhams found their jobs disappeared overnight. And when they tried to organise resistance, the cops turned up to have words with them about manning picket lines. But there was no law to stop Debenhams firing all those workers during the COVID crisis. Black Lives Matter, heroic demonstrations, and well-organised demonstrations with proper social distancing, those demonstrations came under the heavy hand of the police as well. Trade unionists on those demonstrations, along with other people, were fined. So why was it that the police were able to fine Black Lives Matter's demonstrators, but didn't notice the Tories having parties in Downing Street? They didn't find any reason to fine them. A health worker across the water who was given a £10,000 fine for being part of a health workers' protest, £10,000. And there was a mass appeal and they brought in £17,000 to pay the fine. But the fact that that health worker was fined £10,000, has Boris Johnson been fined £10,000 yet? Has Boris Johnson been dragged through the media? And the worst of all, comrades, the worst of all, Sarah Everhart, murdered by a cop, and then people try and hold a vigil, and the cops land on them brutally and kick them all over the place. The same people in the same organisation attack people who want to have a peaceful vigil. So, comrades, what is the balance sheet of COVID? Well, the balance sheet is this. When they introduce laws, they introduce those laws to represent the interests of their class, not our class. So we, as a trade union movement, must remember what we did during COVID. We must remember what we did in the schools, what we did in the hospitals, what we did in the meat plants, what we did in the post office, where we defended people's health and safety through walking them out, through industrial action and through fighting back. Let that be the lesson of COVID. The lesson of COVID is workers' democracy is what matters and workers' power is what matters.
Patrick, unison. I think follow up with the NIPSA's expression. Our COVID pandemic law just a few hours before the Black Lives Matter demonstration in Belfast in Derry. They specifically, targeting the Black Lives Matter. You could also see the week after, we have the very famous or notorious, the anti-flag protests. They try to defend the city hall, and they all gather in the city hall without any, social distancing or wearing the face mask. You could see, the differences between that kind of discrimination. The brutal murder of George Floyd by the police force in Minnesota, USA, triggered the Black people organized the protests and demonstration across US city. The unstoppable movement of the Black Lives Matter became the icon of police brutality, institutional racism, and related systematic discrimination. It moved swiftly to the world with demonstration across Europe and other parts of the world. From one black man's brutality die, the movement transformed to the historical and cultural side of symbol and statue of colonization, slave trade, the federal flag, the film and music, etc. within the last 2 weeks in June 2020. The outflow of the shock and condemnation about the death of George Floyd is far right and proper. It also highlights the pandemic of silence in our institution and society that cover up most of the wrongdoing, which reinforce the racial inequality, discrimination, and prejudice, which is the daily life experience of the Black and minority ethnic people, whether they are looking for jobs, access to public services such as housing, health and social care, education and training, local district council services, reporting crime, in particular hate crime in Northern Ireland. Racism, xenophobia, Afrophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and related inequality, exclusion, and differential treatment in any form is unlawful and unacceptable in any society. In particular, in our post-conflict society in Northern Ireland, it is a conviction of the BAME community as one voice that we must unequivocally condemn rigorously and call upon the ICTU and affiliate unions, community leaders, church leaders, business leaders, politicians, and the future of the Northern Executive to do the same. During the UN World Conference Against Racism in Durban in September 2001, a new agenda of people of African descent was set up and has developed the latest international decade for people of African descent, 2015 to 2024. The proclamation of this decade called for states worldwide to take action to address the historical and continuing discrimination that people of African descent experience. In Northern Ireland, the Stephen Lawrence Inquiry Report made over 200 recommendations for the UK. It is only one recommendation implemented here, which is the definition of hate crime and the hate incident. Our asylum seeker, migrants, and refugees face immigration hostile environment and easily fall into the trap of the windrush deportation as a result of regular immigration check and the hard Brexit within the common travel area, north and south, east and west. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, if I put motion number 24 to conference, all those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That motion is unanimously carried. Okay. If we could then move on to motion 25 in the name of CSP. Thanks, Claire.
Chair,
conference, Claire Ronald from the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, proposing motion 25. And a note to myself, next time I'm proposing motions for conference, I need not to write two motions which are quite interlinked because it makes writing your speeches really difficult. And also a note for the audience, please pay attention as themes may repeat and I may ask you questions. Both motion 25 and 27 have a focus on inequality, but this motion focuses more on COVID and on data. So yep, two subjects sure to help ease a hangover. It has been said before that COVID is a storm we've all faced, but we were not all in the same boat. Some had luxury yachts and stayed fairly safe, while others had partially deflated life rings and so were easily submerged. Prior to COVID, life was not nirvana. We had pre-existing health inequalities, and COVID has got into those cracks and made them wider. This has impacted in many areas. COVID mortality rates have generally been 3 to 4 times higher in more deprived areas compared to least deprived. And Western Trust contains 5 of the most 10 deprived wards for the whole of Northern Ireland. Bangladeshi and Pakistani men and women had mortality rates 3 times higher than white men and women. And it's not just health. The attainment gap between disadvantaged students and peers has grown, and there's been a rise in inactivity and those not working due to long-term sickness or disability. With the landscape so significantly changed, we can't just go back to trying to do what we did before COVID. We need to see how, as we restart, we can decrease inequality, not widen it. Our members are tired and trying to pull the pieces of work back together. So it's up to us as a movement to work collectively and focus on decreasing inactivity as we restart. To do that, we need to understand data, and we need to challenge when organisations are measuring the wrong thing. Data is powerful, but we have to have knowledge. If we have accurate data on long COVID, then we can target resources more effectively. And this actually ties into our next motion, as we require a joined up effort across all government departments and a functioning executive to coordinate the delivery of services and support to decrease inequality, not widen it. Please support the motion.
Chair, General Secretary, Delegates, Stephanie Greenwood, unison, supporting the motion. This motion states that COVID-19 has been a challenge. It further states the impact of COVID-19 has not been felt equally across our society. I have recently attended several equality engagement events, and this week, on behalf of health unions, will attend a workshop which will focus on health inequalities. Section 75 addresses social inequalities between different groups in society to help people live in a fairer society. The current data, statistics and research inform public policy as well as academic and private sector research, which improves our understanding by producing and disseminating high quality, meaningful data. However, this motion calls for additional training and resources to enable all of us to access and utilise this data as we set up our campaigns. We all need to be able to scrutinise the executive, civil servants and of public services. We must do this to halt the widening inequality in our society. If we were even to study a small fraction of the data already available to us, we would acknowledge factually that our population, which is set to grow by 7.6% by 2041, is one where inequalities have already widened and the disparity grows. Low pay, violence and aggression against women, violence in the workplace, loneliness, unpaid carers, a fearful and hateful society grows. Women are failed with few childcare options, few promotions, facing sexual harassment and suffering with more violence at home. Race discrimination grows, many individuals finding themselves the victim of hate crime. Our LGBT communities excluded from using many services, and those with disabilities face exclusion and limited education and employment opportunities. What does all this mean for many of us? What does it look like now? Low pay and poverty, poor health outcomes, homelessness, poor standards of education for our children, hunger, cold homes, a decline in welfare and benefit support, a bleak, bleak society. Does that sound familiar? But we do have the ability to utilise the data and use a number of pieces of legislation to change this picture. Social justice is when each person can exercise their rights within a society. And as we plan our campaigns, we should keep this at the heart of each and every one of them. Conference, please support.
Thank you, Stephanie. If there's no other speakers, I'll put motion 25 to conference. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That motion is carried. If we could move on then to, and call on Patricia McKeown on behalf of the NIC to move motion 26.
Thank you, Chair. Conference, Patricia McKeown, unison moving this motion on behalf of the Northern Ireland Committee. What a debt we owe to the women of this movement and the women's movement across this island, who for more than 50 years struggled to get us to the place we are now, which is finally legislation on abortion services. And that's 2 years on the statute books, major international pressure, the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women telling the UK government, get your act together, make this happen in Northern Ireland. And the legislation we have, welcomed by this movement, is not of itself yet of the full international standard or medical standards we would want, but it's there, and it's a wonderful thing that it is there. But what a surprise the abortion services are not. The Secretary of State said that if our executive and assembly did not put it into place, the government would step in, the UK government would step in and do it. It was passed to our Minister for Health. Our Minister for Health in turn passed it to the full executive during that 2-year period when they were in office. And of course, surprise, surprise, like anything that vaguely looks like a woman's right, it was blocked. And it stays blocked at the point at which the executive moved into elections. We all know the consequence of that. We all voted again. This was a major issue in the hustings that many of us held with each of the candidates and the political parties, and commitments were given. But of course, we don't have a government. We don't have an executive functioning. So we have two big problems here. The health service staff providing unequal abortion services across the system have no protection, no regulations, no guidance, and most importantly, there is no common high standard for the services that are being provided for women, and that is not a situation we can allow to persist. In addition, there are people in this society, of course, who will always think that they have the right to intimidate any woman who's trying to exercise her rights. And for that reason, safe zones legislation was debated at the Assembly, and it got to its final stage, but it hasn't been implemented. It's remarkable how the opponents of equality and human rights find ways of twisting the arguments and attempting to use equality and in particular human rights legislation to reverse any kind of progress that's been going on. We most recently saw what you might call a secret implementation plan that belongs to the PSNI, using arguments about why you really couldn't interfere with those who are intimidating health workers and women themselves in the locales where abortion services are available, how they couldn't really interfere because would they be breaching the human rights of the protesters? Well, there is no human right to intimidate. never has been, never will be. And we're now saying to the UK government, you said if our people didn't introduce it and make sure those services were fully operational, you would do it. Well, they haven't done it. We haven't had a government since when? February, March. Plenty of time for the Secretary of State and the UK government to properly commission the services and put high quality services into place. It has not happened. Plenty of time to properly implement the safe zones legislation. It has not happened. And what the Northern Ireland Committee is saying, as a movement, we will not tolerate that situation. So we call on everyone to support this motion and to do what they can to exert further pressure on our own political system and on the UK government to make this a reality.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. Karen, the second motion.
Chair, Conference, Taryn Trainer, Unite, seconding motion 26. The right of women to access free and safe reproductive care, including abortion services, remains a contested one, of course, in this island. In the last year, we have witnessed the rollback of a women's right to choice in the US, where the historic Roe versus Wade decision was overturned by a Supreme Court stacked by the right wing. In Northern Ireland, while women now have the theoretical right to access abortion, those rights have not materialised in the trusts. Despite abortion having been decriminalised in October 2019, abortion is still not available, which means that many women cannot access abortion services in Northern Ireland. Now, the Secretary of State has committed and has instructed that he will commission in each of the trusts, but that's all going to take time to resource and get staff, and Northern Ireland has to provide the money for that. So the trade union movement can't take their eye off the ball here. I know the Secretary of State has said that he will commission this. He is pro-life, but irrespective of that, he has said that he will commission it. So the reality for most women seeking an abortion in Northern Ireland is that they must travel to access it. The idea of free legal abortions remains as far away as ever currently. Many GPs still refuse to provide early abortion health care, especially in more rural areas, which is shocking. As recent events in the United States have shown, the right to access safe abortion must be continuously fought and continuously defended. Sisters, trade unionists and other activists who have fought for and won abortion rights on the island of Ireland have demonstrated what strategic campaigning looks like. We need to dust off those skills, not only to defend the rights already won, but also to ensure that those rights are translated into reality for the women still unable to access abortion care here in Northern Ireland. As stated in this motion, we need to see the words from the Secretary of State translate into action. Action to ensure that every woman can access what is a basic human right. Don't forget, this is a basic human right, and can access it freely through the National Health Service. We also need to see the implementation, as it states in the motion, of our safe zones, and also the introduction of telemedicine abortion services, which are already available in the rest of the UK and in Ireland. So in doing so, we need to stand in solidarity with activists in the United States fighting once again for a women's right to full and accessible reproductive health care. Thank you. Conference, delegates, Alan McVicker, Unison, speaking in support of this motion. Conference, Patricia has articulated very well the current status of access to abortion services in Northern Ireland. And I'd like to add to this motion with some lived experiences of women accessing abortion, especially during the pandemic. A woman in her 20s, impossible to travel because she worked in frontline services, was using contraception but had a stomach bug and it failed.
She was told that they were prioritising people who were 8 weeks pregnant or more and they could not help her yet. There was no medical reason for this delay. It was a resource issue. A migrant woman with a young child, no family support, entitled to NHS care, called Advice Line and was unable to qualify for pills by post as her English was not her first language and they couldn't be sure that she understood the consent form. They tried to organise her travel. This was impossible with a young child and no one to care for the child due to lockdown. As the abortion in England would be surgical, she could not bring the child anyway. She opted for pills at home through other means. And we're all very aware of the extreme measures that women have taken in attempts to self-abort prior to any legislation being in place, and this comes with a trigger warning. A mother of 3, never taken drugs in her life before, who scored heroin because she hoped the shock to her system would cause a miscarriage. Another woman, I asked my partner to hit me in the stomach with a bat. People inserting crochet and knitting needles into their womb. Conference. This is why we have campaigned for abortion services and call for abortion services to be commissioned. During the pandemic, in 2020, over 300 women had to travel to access abortion services from Northern Ireland, even though telemedicine was introduced globally and throughout the UK, but not in Northern Ireland for abortion services. Abortion regulations, as has been said, have been passed, yet the longer Northern Ireland is without accessible services, the longer Northern Ireland is in clear breach of the human rights that the CEDAW inquiry and subsequent law changes were supposed to correct. Research from Amnesty International UK, released in October 22, has found that only 10% of women in Northern Ireland know how to access abortion services. It also found that 87% of the public are unaware of the circumstances in which abortion is permitted, and fewer than half of the women, 46%, would be comfortable speaking to their GP about accessing abortion. And this really shows that there's still such a stigma around women and pregnant people's reproductive health care. It also revealed 60% of adults think the government should be doing more to make abortion services available and accessible across Northern Ireland. You know, whenever I heard the news in March 2020 that Northern Ireland would have access to abortion services, I, like many other people, cried, shouted, jumped for joy, and it was a very emotional time. But here we are in 2022 with limited services, and the impact on women is horrendous and inhumane. Conference. It is, and it always has been, the activists and single issue groups like Alliance for Choice who are once again doing the job that our devolved government has been tasked to do and are failing to do it. And you know what? Shame on them. Conference. This is an inhumane treatment that women have and continue to unnecessarily endure. It is institutions which are freely available in all other regions of the UK. Enough is enough. Women deserve better. Please support the motion.
Okay, thank you very much. And I now put motion 26 to conference. All those in favour? Any against? Abstentions? That motion is unanimously carried. Thank you, conference. We move on then and call the mover of motion 27 in the name of CSP. Thanks, Claire.
Chair, conference. Claire Ronald, Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, proposing motion 27. Inequality, the rerun or the return. And I'm aware that sequels are never as good as the original, so sorry, but that does not bode well for the next few minutes of your life. This time we're looking at strategic government decisions and how they can impact on equalities. We are calling on conference to ensure that when we get a functioning NI executive and a programme for government, that we need a cross-departmental strategy that tackles inequalities and ill health. And as the CSP, we have to put a plug in there that the right for rehab should be included in that so that we maximise people's potential. We need this to do more than acknowledge the need to improve healthy life expectancy and narrow the gap. Instead, we need specific targets. We also need to realise that healthcare is not the main determinant of health. Instead, healthcare picks up on government's failures to deal with health inequalities. We also need to stop framing discussions around inequality as being primarily a matter of personal choice. No one individually can influence the quality of the air we breathe, our access to green spaces, or can regulate governing house insulation and ventilation. Was a 2-year-old dying due to a damp house personal choice, or a failure of governments to prevent that situation? It's also telling that the real reduction in smoking prevalence only really occurred when governments acted to ban smoking in public places. Governments can prevent inequalities. In wealthy countries, determinants of poor population health are no longer a lack of food, poor sanitation, and unclean drinking water. Instead, it's more likely to be linked to a lack of opportunity and bleak social and economic outlooks. And governments, more than individuals, can impact on that. We need a strategy that embeds health as a central policy focus across all government departments. And we need the right data and to be measuring the right things, which links back to motion 25. Just as tackling health inequalities needs sustained action across governments, it also needs coordinated action across all unions. Health unions cannot deal with health inequalities on our own. Health inequalities need everyone's support. Please support the motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. James?
Chair, General Secretary, Delegates, James Large Unison speaking in support of motion 27. Delegates, this is an important motion. It highlights to us all the stark reality of health inequalities in Northern Ireland. Conference, we have already carried motions on the cost of living crisis, on collective bargaining, and on tackling precarious work. These are all causes of in-work poverty, which fuels health inequalities across our society. In taking this motion forward, and in calling for a renewed cross-departmental strategy to tackle health inequalities, we should also renew our calls for an anti-poverty strategy and a range of equality strategies which remain outstanding. Despite the legal requirement to do so, the Executive has never had an anti-poverty strategy setting out the measures that it will take to tackle poverty based on objective need. Under the New Decade New Approach Agreement, commitments were made to take these strategies forward, but they've never been adopted. As the effects of the cost of living crisis are felt across our society, a fully resourced and comprehensive anti-poverty strategy is now more vital than ever. The strategy should deliver on issues like tackling low pay, precarious work, and enhancing collective bargaining. It should provide for a rights-based social security system, mitigating or reversing the cuts to the welfare state that have been driven by austerity. And it should take actions on issues like childcare and universal free school meals that would make a huge difference for families. Tackling inequalities in ill health requires poverty to be tackled. We must lead the way in that fight. Please support the motion.
Thanks, James. Any other speakers? No. If there's no other speakers, then I'll put motion 27 to conference. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That motion's carried. Then call on the mover from SOR for motion 28.
Chair, Conference, Cora Regan speaking on behalf of the Society of Radiographers, moving motion 28. Healthcare, like other public services, does not sleep. Services are rightly expected to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with staff working unsocial hours to provide safe services to patients. However, increasingly such workers are subjected to substandard working conditions. Food provision for staff depends on the hours worked during their shift. While there is generally more adequate provision during the normal working day, with restaurants being open for lunch and dinner services, this is not replicated during twilight or night duty shifts when visitors leave and patients sleep. Often there is no hot food provision for these staff, with restaurants and cafes closed for economic reasons, driving the necessity for staff to access costly and unhealthy fast food options. It is widely documented that the body's circadian rhythm is disturbed by working twilight and night shifts, and that this can significantly and detrimentally impact on a person's mental and physical health. It is also widely documented that healthy nutrition reduces this detrimental impact, as well as reducing fatigue whilst on shift. Whilst employers state they support the well-being of staff, the lack of equality in food provision is putting the welfare of staff at risk. A healthy workforce is a better workforce. Our staff deserve to be treated and diagnosed safely by staff who are well rested and fed. Nutritious hot food should be available at regular intervals right across the 24-hour period, on weekdays, weekends, and public holidays. Whilst it is true that such a provision will incur a financial cost, both the monetary and non-monetary benefits of such a provision to staff, as well as the long-term impact on patient care, is obvious. We call upon Congress to firstly actively support access to nutritious, affordable on-site food provision at regular intervals across the full 24-hour period on weekdays, weekends, and public holidays. And secondly, to develop guidance for employers and reps to champion the economic, social, and health benefits of investments in the diets of key workers. Conference, please support this motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Cora.
Chair, Delegates Margaret McKay Unison supporting motion 28, hot food for healthcare workers. Conference, Unison has entered into negotiations with the catering service in the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust, and we are delighted to report we have successfully succeeded on a number of main objectives linked to this motion. The BHSCT catering management stated that it would not be serving hot food at the weekends in the new maternity hospital based on the RVH site. But after negotiations with them, it will be serving hot nutritional food. And in addition to this, we have secured the weekend enhanced hours for our catering staff. This was always a 7-day service in our old maternity hospital and will remain so in the new. During those negotiations, we also heard from our members about the price of meals in all our canteens within the Trust, and how a lot of our members couldn't afford to buy a hot meal every day. So we have secured an agreement for a daily discounted hot meal in all of our catering facilities within the Trust. And some of our hospitals have already started it, but we hope to have it rolled out within the coming weeks. However, we recognise we still have a lot of work to do, as we must not forget our night shift workers or our community workers, as we need to extend access to hot nutritional food to them. They work 24/7 as well. Our community workers are in a workforce who work in hospitals without walls, and we cannot ignore their needs any longer. Conference, in the words of Cesar Chavez, if you really want to make a friend, eat with them. So please, let us support this motion, let us build in this motion, and make sure we get the facilities for our members to sit down together and eat a hot, nutritional and affordable meal. I support.
Thank you. Mary, are you? Oh, you're on the next motion? Okay. No other speakers on motion number 28 then. I will put motion 28 to conference. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That motion is carried. Then move on to motion 29 in the name of RCM. Mary.
Conference, Mary Cadell, Royal College of Midwives, and I'm presenting motion 29 in the case for a new strategy for maternity care, in Northern Ireland. It's more than a decade that has now passed since the Department of Health started a review that led to the first publication of a strategy for care for 2012 to 2018. This strategy helped deliver many improvements in maternity care across Northern Ireland. However, it's nearly 4 years that have passed since the strategy was successfully implemented by our hardworking midwives and maternity support workers, with, I may add, little or no additional money or staff resources. We still have one remaining outstanding aspect of maternity care in relation to that to implement fully, and that is in relation to maternal mental health. It is now time for a new refreshed strategy for the decade ahead. We had around 22,000 births in Northern Ireland in 2021, and our maternity care is a service that we must get right for those families and in the interest of the population's health. If we get this right at the beginning of life, we're in a much better position to impact positively on the health of future generations. And there are a number of significant areas that have to form the focus for any new maternity strategy. And number one, top of any list, is the workforce. Getting the workforce right is the foundation of any strategy that's being delivered. And we have to deliver that safe maternity services across Northern Ireland. We have some work that has been commenced in the delivering care policy framework that the department is involved in, and that will and has to inform our new strategy. We must ensure that any recommendations for the maternity workforce needs now and in the future are fully implemented. Particular attention must be paid to the significant challenges that our workforces face in this current situation. It's essential that we consider how we best respond to all of the needs of all of the women who access our maternity services. We have an increasing number of health and social complexities which are experienced by women, and this must also be reflected in this strategy if we are really and truly to deliver care for all those who use our maternity services. Women now request and rightly expect safe, effective care with real choice of place of birth and maternity services that support them and their families. Women need that personalised care. It needs to be provided through a midwife-led environment or through continuity of care schemes, which have to be planned and must be reflected in any future plans for delivering maternity services. Every pregnant woman will need a midwife, but some will need a doctor too, and we have to do this collaboratively. The new strategy must ensure that our maternity services make a significant contribution to improve our public health. The learning and recommendations that we've all heard about from recent reports published following investigations into failing maternity services at a number of trusts in the UK also have to be considered in planning a new strategy. We don't want to replicate that, and we don't want to see those failings in our services for maternity care in Northern Ireland. We need an appropriately planned workforce. We need a funded system for delivering safe maternity services, and these are absolute essentials. The need for a renewed maternity strategy for Northern Ireland, which must be informed by a proper review of all of our maternity services, grows more urgent by every passing week and month. A new maternity strategy is the best way to ensure the development of those services and that they are responsive, evidence-based, and provide safe, sustainable, quality care to women and their families. Fundamental to how we develop any strategy is recognising the need for transformational change that ensures women and their families are at the centre of our system, not trying to navigate a system that does not meet their needs. Women and their families deserve a service that reflects the needs of the population, challenges health inequalities, and ensures that Northern Ireland's next generation is healthier than any that has come before. Please support the motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary. Speakers? Are you speaking on this? No. Okay, if there's no other speakers, then could I have a seconder? Formally seconded. Okay, thanks very much. So I'll put motion number 29 to conference. All those in favour? Against? Abstentions? That motion is carried. Okay, if then move on to motion 30 in the name of Unison. Thank you.
Chair, General Secretary, Delegates. Deborah Yappager is Unison, moving motion 30. fighting for our health and social care services. Delegates, in her welcome yesterday to all of us, Jill Weir spoke of the fears and concerns of the people of Fermanagh and the wider area are facing at the news that the emergency service provision at the SWA is being withdrawn. The situation now being seen at the SWA is a symptom of the wider problems facing our health and social care services, namely, a lack of genuine engagement with local communities and the workforce on the future organisation and delivery of services. A failure to properly workforce plan across all staff groups, leading to vital services being stood down. And a real sustained investment in services is also lacking. We have all heard the stories of people waiting years for treatment, often in chronic pain, with it being reported that 1 in 4 of those are waiting for their first hospital appointment or consultation. We've all heard of the waiting hours and even days for treatment in our overstretched emergency departments. And we have all heard of hospitals unable to discharge patients back home because of a lack of care packages, services which have been outsourced, privatised and underfunded. Some of us have also experienced these issues firsthand. We are all meant to enjoy the right to the highest attainable standard of health. And yet, for those living in the areas of highest deprivation in our societies, including a great many of our members, they find themselves experiencing poor outcomes around their health compared to those living in the least deprived areas. These outcomes will only grow worse as a result of the cost of living crisis we now face. Poverty drives poor health, highlighting for us all why the fight for decent pay and a proper social security system is so vital. In the coming weeks and months, workers across health and social care will be taking industrial action for decent pay. They will do so because they and their families need to be protected from the cost of living crisis and because they will be taking a stand once again in defence of services. Decent pay is fundamentally important to recruit and retain the workforces our services need. A workforce that is currently thousands of workers short. For those reasons, Unison is calling on the Northern Ireland Committee via its Health Committee and working across affiliates to initiate a campaign demanding that the health and well-being of the people be the #1 priority for all of our governments. The motion sets a number of key actions which we must pursue across all aspects of health and social care. Now is the time for us to defend our members, their families and their communities. A number of Unison delegates are going to speak on this motion. They work directly across health and social care and they see the problems facing the system every day. But they also know the solutions. It is their voice and the voices of the tens of thousands of health and social care workers we collectively represent, which must be heard and acted upon. Please support this motion. I move. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Speakers?
Chair Conference, Conor McCarthy, Unison, supporting motion 30, fighting for our health and social care services. Conference will be aware of the deep concerns that we have in relation to the human rights of our population and the inability to have access to safe and effective healthcare via the NHS. Many of our members and their families find themselves having to find the funds to pay for private healthcare when they should have access to this by law, as stated in law via the NHS. Our political parties, both North and South, and in Westminster, are failing in the basic function of good government, namely looking after the health and well-being of the population and upholding the principles of the NHS. Access to healthcare is a human right that we pay for via progressive taxation, and we have medical profession that are capitalising on the current health crisis, and this is being facilitated by a political class. We must not let this continue. The people on waiting lists are not a commodity. They are people who have paid for access to healthcare and are currently being denied it. We will not be silent on calling this out. We will also not be silent on calling and demanding for an all-Ireland NHS free at the point of need. Conference, while we may be living through one of the toughest times in living memory, and our union has met this challenge head on. There is an unacceptable amount of vacancies in our health and social care system, and it is very difficult to actually get a job in our health service. Unison will not be fooled. We understand only too well the barriers to effective, timely recruitment in the NHS are nothing to do with a skills shortage. The problems of recruitment are a consequence of political decision-making, of outsourcing, underfunding, of a dysfunctional system that is by design underpinned by an ideology, namely privatisation. Conference, we must push back and abolish the internal market that is destroying the NHS. Conference, agency workers are not the problem. Agency workers are exploited and they need our protection. We do not need rid of agency workers. We need to unionise agency workers and get this workforce permanent contracts, something across the health service and social care services unison and ourselves, people here, have been doing very successfully in recent months and years. Get rid of the agency employers and just unionise their workers. Conference will note the Health Minister's most recent announcement to abolish all off-contract agencies in nursing by February 23. Make no mistake, Conference, Anne Speed, our Unison Head of Bargaining, has made this a priority for us coming in the coming year. Unison will be demanding much more radical change to reform when it comes to ensuring that we remove the market from nursing. We will be demanding the reform of the Nurse Bank, a regionally publicly funded bank with the enhanced rate working within the AFC framework, and that one that delivers a safer outcome for patients and protects the nursing workforce from further privatisation. This is our goal. This is what we will achieve, preferably through negotiation. However, let us be clear, through dispute if necessary. And through our Pay Max campaign, we have seen thousands of our workers enhance their grade and receiving millions of pounds in arrears right across the health service, something which we are all very proud of. Conference, never has there been a time in our collective history where we all need to come together and organise and unionise and fight back. And fight back we will. The employers and government and the profiteers are no match for our collective strength, standing shoulder to shoulder with our communities and our families. No one will defeat us. Conference, please support this motion. Thank you.
Chair, Conference, Patricia McKeown Unison supporting this motion. I don't think we have ever seen a more dangerous time for the National Health Service. And it's not a struggle that should be left solely to unions organising health and social care workers. It is a fight that we've all got to undertake if we're going to protect what we have. The current UK government's been in power for a very long time, and within its DNA is the mission to destroy the National Health Service. That's been their mission since 1948. For too long here, we had people in charge of our health service for a significant period of time who were and are aligned to that same political philosophy. So we find ourselves with a health service across these islands in a worse state than anyone else's. Not that anyone else's is particularly healthy. But, I mean, the shocking truth is, in this very small place where we live, a massive proportion of society, the public, the people, are in dire need of health and social services that they cannot get. I now have personal bitter experience of what it means to die while waiting. And that is something that is familiar, I think, to far too many families, and has become even more familiar in the 2 odd years of the lockdown and the rightly so, the focus on dealing with the pandemic. But there's been no real account taken of how many people are no longer with us over that period because of the downturn in health services, because of the thousands of people who were already missing from the system and the thousands who are leaving now because the sacrifices they've made and the stress that they've felt has not been recognised. We will be out on strike very shortly. We hope that all the unions across the health system will be taking similar action. We dearly, dearly want the medical profession to speak up, because the role that they have played in this is not an honourable one. It isn't honourable to promote private medicine to the extent to which it has been provided here over the last 10 years. Before that, there was no market here for private medicine. But I have to say, you know, through the bad offices of our own government, that has become possible. There's now a real market. And the only people who have allowed that to happen are the people who are in charge of the state and in charge of the health service. There is no reason why there should not be a clear instruction issued that the right kind of doctors will provide A&E services in Fermanagh or anywhere else. But no one will step up to the mark. And I'm calling on the medical profession to, among their ranks, there are decent, honest people who are committed to the National Health Service, raise their heads above the parapet, speak out, stand with us. And as far as the campaign led by Congress is concerned, one of the most important things we've got to do is bring the public with us and give the people of Northern Ireland the space to be able to have their voices genuinely heard and their stories really told. And that way, we have a real chance of saving the National Health Service. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Patricia. There's no other speakers. I'll put motion 30 to conference. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That motion is unanimously carried. If we move on then to motion 31 in the name of Society of Radiographers. Thank you. Oh, sorry, and just before you speak, could again just, I think maybe there's one or two people haven't checked out in the hotel, so if you're in the room, could you maybe nip out now and check out so that the hotel can get cleaning in your room? Thanks very much.
Thanks. Chair Conference, Leandra Archer, Society of Radiographers.
Sorry, could we settle down, please? Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Thanks. Move a motion 31, an international recruitment charter. We're all very much aware of the workforce challenges within the health and social care system. Years of excessive underfunding by the government and poor to no workforce planning have led to what we have today, a workforce crisis in most professions. In radiography, we're not training enough radiographers in Northern Ireland to meet demand for now or indeed for the future. This strategy, or indeed lack of it, has led to poor workforce environments where safe staffing levels are not being met. We are now relying more and more on our international recruits to fill the vacancies. We should greatly value and appreciate our international recruits who are helping us deal with the workforce challenges. With increasing levels of international recruitment, unfortunately, we urgently need to question the treatment of our colleagues. Unions, including SOR, have found examples of employers, including the NHS, threatening to recover visa fees and travel costs or holding recruits to bogus training fees. Some private employers have overly long notice periods and are extending probation periods indefinitely. There have been cases in the UK where NHS staff have been tied into roles for 5 years or having penalties of £14,000 to move jobs or return to their home countries. This taints the reputation of the NHS, but more importantly, this is exploitation of vulnerable workers and is parallels to modern day slavery. We have thousands of vacancies in the HSC and hundreds of thousands of vacancies throughout the NHS. International recruitment is an important way to provide an increase to workforce numbers. Schemes to attract people from other countries are essential. We need to support them from start to finish of their employment and time here. Often those that leave their countries and families behind enter into a foreign environment with little to no support and are expected to adapt to the cultures within the health and social care system. In some cases, they're walking into hostile environments which they're forced to endure due to unjust contractual terms. We call on conference to develop a charter for employers to use when employing international recruits, to name and challenge employers that fail to meet these standards, and challenge the Home Office to remove rights from employers to sponsor visas who use modern-day slavery practices. We ask conference to provide resources for both employers and international recruits for best practices and support, continue to develop materials and training to mainstream challenging equality and racism into all rep work, and support unions developing equality reps to champion anti-racism in the workplace. I call on conference to support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
General Secretary, Chair, Conference, Niall McCarroll, Chairperson, Day Trades Union Council, speaking in support of motion 31. Delegates, I think this is the time and opportunity for us as trade unionists to raise the truly horrific situation facing international workers recruited to work in Qatar, and since the World Cup was awarded to this Gulf state. International solidarity has always been a key component in our movement. 15,000 deaths for 5,760 minutes of football. That is the latest statistic on workers who have lost their lives in the build-up to the World Cup in Qatar. Forced labour and all other forms of abuse continue unabated, including domestic workers, most of whom are women, who must pay extortionate recruitment fees, can't change jobs or leave this country. It is only right and proper that we question the human rights abuses in Qatar, the lack of equality and freedom of expression for international workers. It is also right we call out inequality, deprivation and poverty created at home for international workers. It should not matter where you were born or how you come to work in any particular part of the world. Equality should be a standard. Common decency should be a given. Conference, to finish, I believe ICTU should write to the Irish League and the League of Ireland, raising our concerns on how workers and their families are being mistreated and asking what these organisations have done on this issue around the Qatar World Cup. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Niall. There's no other speakers on motion 31. I'll put motion 31 to conference. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That motion is carried. Then move on to motion 32 in the name of NASUWT.
General Secretary, Chair, Delegates, Paul Kennedy, NASUWT, moving motion 32 on the cost of education. Conference asserts that it is a fundamental principle of our public services that they are free at the point of use, and that educational experiences that promote opportunity and achievement should not be determined by the ability to pay. The increase in the number of schools who are using the immoral practice of pressurising parents and carers into paying towards their children's education is totally unacceptable. With regard to this issue, I would like to reflect on Article 28 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child with regard to education. Article 28 guarantees free compulsory education for primary children for all. Progressive free secondary education that should in any case be available and accessible to all. It should be noted, the recurring word in Article 28 is free, not fee. It is unacceptable that schools in the secondary sector pressurise parents and carers to make voluntary financial contributions to a school fund. This creates financial hardship on families who have several or more children attending the same school. It creates a hierarchy among schools, with perceived prestigious schools setting higher fees. It is even more shameful that parents and carers who are currently going through a cost of living crisis with continued rise in inflation, who already are suffering financial pressures, should have the additional pressure to pay for their children's education via a fee for a school fund or other demands. It's an immoral practice and it has to stop. It's being carried out by far too many schools in Northern Ireland. It has to stop. The second practice I would like to highlight is the unacceptably expensive school uniform. This is due to retailers having the exclusive right to sell school uniforms for one particular school or for a selection of schools. This enables retailers to set their own price, have a monopoly with regard to the costing and sale of school uniforms. Education should be free to all children without fees or additional financial costs. I request the conference support this motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Somebody second the motion?
Yeah.
Aye, Fergal McGuckin, also NASUWT, to second the motion. And by the way, I'd just like to highlight the fact that I'm using an iPad for this. Just remember that when I'm speaking. As the motion states, it's a fundamental principle of our public services that they are free at the point of use. We all know that this principle is being sorely tested in our health service, but it is also increasingly the case in relation to the education sector. Comrades, I would contend that in the teeth of a generation-defining cost of living crisis, we stand at a line in the sand moment regarding the ever-rising costs of education. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation's recent Poverty in Northern Ireland report stated that poorer children would live for about 15 fewer years in good health than children from richer backgrounds. This rather startling statistic reflects a depressing, almost self-fulfilling prophecy for a section of our population, a prophecy which is set in motion from their early childhood years, a prophecy that I fear we are all acquiescing to regarding the ever-rising cost of education. The Foundation uses relative poverty as a measure of the standard of living. Using that metric, there are at least a minimum of 110,000 children living in poverty in Northern Ireland. In a cost of education study carried out by the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People, it was noted that for many children, access to critical education opportunities and key entitlements were based on their parents' ability to pay. There is an increasing disparity between schools, not only in terms of what provision is offered, but also how much it costs to access this provision. And this is increasing inequality. They found that parents with children attending schools spent an average of over £1,500 per child, with the average spend on a child attending a grammar school almost £2,000. There was no explicit inclusion of paying for things like assisted technology within the survey. So if you add that in, the total cost could be near £2,500 on average for many. This study was also conducted before the pandemic and current cost of living crisis. Goodness knows what the cost per child is now. Stresses on the economy after COVID-19, made infinitely worse by reckless and corrupt Tory policies, mean that parents and wider society in general cannot continue to subsidise the cost of education here. So in the midst of the current cost of living crisis, the worst in a generation, is it really justifiable for some schools to continue to pass the cost of education on to already financially hard-pressed families? We don't expect pupils to pay for the desktop computers they use in their ICT suites or the books that they use in their school library, do we? So why do we expect them to pay for their own iPads? Many families can't even afford to access adequate Wi-Fi, never mind an expensive tablet. Even worse, some parents felt coerced into purchasing this technology, often having to avail of expensive hire purchase agreements when cheaper alternatives were and are clearly available. The iPad is the most expensive tablet device on the market at £500 to £600, and yet it is the tablet of choice for most schools. Why? And this unjustifiable expense comes on top of all of the other existing spiralling education costs. For example, why do many schools insist on having expensive branded sportswear for PE? Why do some retailers have exclusivity on the provision of expensive school uniforms? Surely there are cheaper yet equally viable alternatives out there. In closing, I'm going to do something I would never normally do: give credit to a Tory. With the introduction of the Butler Education Act of 1944, we have come to assume that our right to a free education is sacrosanct, and quite right too. So whatever happened to that? Rob Butler, the man behind the Act and a Conservative Chancellor, no less, will be positively spinning in his grave right now. Comrades, I think it's time to take a stand on where we're going regarding the ever-increasing cost of education. If new technology has obvious educational benefits, for example, that's great. But let's not saddle parents with the cost of it. I fervently believe the union should take a firm position on this, as to say nothing is to be complicit in adding to the debt burden of already hard-pressed families. Many teachers and NASU members, like myself, are parents too, and we are also witness to the poverty and inequality experienced by many of our pupils day in and day out. So we should empathise with and have solidarity with them and their parents who are struggling financially. Comrades, it's time to call for a ban on the compulsory purchase of expensive technology in schools, end exclusive deals with school uniform suppliers, extend the school uniform grant to cover sports gear, and demand that the government provides adequate funding for all schools. Conference, I urge you to support this motion.
Chair, General Secretary, delegates, and Taggart Unison speaking in support of motion 32. Delegates, Unison can very much identify with the issues raised by this motion brought forward by the NSUWT. The cost of education and the barriers these costs create for children and families in enjoying the right to education are clear. To the calls made within the motion, we would suggest, however, that in addition to campaigning on the issues of school uniforms, the Northern Ireland Committee also campaigns on the issue of universal free school meals. Unison highlighted the introduction of universal nutritious free school meals as an action that should have been taken to address the cost of living crisis in motion 2 that was carried by delegates in yesterday's session. Within our own union, we have been actively campaigning for the introduction of universal free school meals. This will promote child health and development and reduce poverty for workers and their families. I am a school catering worker, and through the campaign, we want to see the vital role workers like me play, being recognised and promoted. England, Scotland and Wales all offer universal free school meals to various groups of children, with Northern Ireland the only part of the UK not to do so. We need to catch up. The Department of Education has been engaging in a review of both free school meals and uniform grant criteria involving Unison, the ICTU Education and Trade Union Group. We expect to discover the outcome of this review shortly, with a possible public consultation on the introduction of universal options for free school meals to follow. Please support the motion.
Thank you, Anne.
Chair, Conference, Conor McCarthy, Unison, supporting this very important motion. Conference, the spirit of this motion is essentially an anti-poverty motion calling for an end of the burden of education and the costs around education onto hard-pressed families. It calls for an end to the school uniform cartels, which are essentially shouldn't just fall to the EA to address, but should be the responsibility of the Board of Governors. Taking punitive action against school children because they wear their own coat to school instead of a branded coat agreed with the supplier is unacceptable. Conference, I call on NASUWT to go further and expand its campaign to incorporate the Unison call for universal free school meals for all school children, regardless of household income. Our teachers and classroom assistants are not debt collectors. Lunchtime shaming must end. Telling school children that they owe money for school and owe money for dinner, etc., is unacceptable and draconian and needs to stop. All the evidence shows that children who have a nutritional meal in school leads to better educational outcomes and ending segregation in the dinner hall between those who can pay and those who can't pay for school meals. It surely must end and is a good thing. Please support this motion. After all, Conference, we feed our prisoners and we feed our patients 3 times a day, and rightly so. Surely we can feed a kid once a day. Thank you.
Good morning, General Secretary, Chair, comrades, delegates, and yes, my voice is going today. Jane Scott speaking on behalf of NIPSA to fully support this motion. Conference, we agree the cost of sending our children to school is just rising, and it's now at an unacceptable level. The rising cost of uniforms, the additional hefty cost of having to pay for the specially made PE and sports kits, it's totally draining parents, and it's draining their financial resources, and it's causing our families out there stress and anxiety, which they shouldn't have to do. This is exacerbated when children are living in a one-parent family. My friend is a one-parent family. She's 3 school-aged boys, and every year she gets a bill of upwards of £1,000 just for their uniforms and their sports gear. And that's not the extra £2.5 grand to send them to school. That is just for the uniforms to get them there in the first place. And she said to me the other day, I was speaking to her about it, she says, and those only last for 1 year because children grow and they don't stop growing until they've left school. So you find every year you've got to buy a brand new one. You can't pass them down because by the time they're finished with them, they're done. And she said without her parents, she couldn't afford to buy her children's uniforms because her parents actually have to help her out. And the rise in cost of the utility bills, and she says things are having to go now. Conference West, we in NIPSA fully support this mission. We, like our Unison colleagues, we don't think it goes far enough. We've got children coming into our schools in the morning and they're hungry. They're tired and they're hungry. They haven't had a breakfast. And that's shameful. That's a shameful way that our country should be, that our children, and not only are they hungry in the morning, they don't have anything substantial in their lunchbox to keep them going throughout the rest of the day. So we have been calling, and we have, and in fact it was brought up by our colleagues just at GNC with EA last week, about looking at free school meals. And we believe that there should be free school meals for all. The regulations need to be done away with. It needs to come out, because that might be the only hot, nutritious meal that child gets, as so many of our families are depending on food banks to feed their families. They may not get a hot, nutritious meal at home. And not only do we want a free school meal, but Thatcher stole our milk and we want it back. England, if you live in England, your children will get free milk up until the P4. In Northern Ireland, they don't get it. So we want the free milk back, because how many parents out there are giving their children that nutrition for their bodies, for their bones, for their teeth, and for their health. So we want the free milk back as well. Not only does that help our children, but it also puts money back into the economy to the dairy farmers. Let's face it, it would be helping the economy. We do have some schools operate a breakfast club, but again, that's a cost to parents who can ill afford to pay it. Conference, I believe that those changes would make a huge difference in the children's ability to concentrate in class, and it would assist them achieve better in their education. I'm going to give you an example. In 2013, I went over to Tanzania, and it was the start of a charity that we work alongside, and they started a feeding programme in school, so the children get one meal in school. It's a cup of porridge, but that's their meal in school. I returned again in 2018. What a difference in those children. They were healthier. They were achieving the achievement on they call it their Standard 7 exam that gets them to go to higher education. There was a 55% uplift on the children passing that Standard 7 plan of the people that were on the feeding plan. Now, and they were then able to go on to further education. The gap between Northern Ireland and Africa is gradually getting smaller. We are getting to that stage that our children are not going to be achieving because they're hungry and they can't concentrate. Enable us. We need to do
Jane,
everything.
Can I ask you to wind up, please?
Yeah, we need to do everything we can to make education affordable, free at the point of service for all of our children. And the cost of sending them to school needs to come down. After all, these children are our future. They are our future generation. And this country has a duty of care to educate them to the best of their ability. Get the prices down, educate our children, educate them, and get them into schools being the best that they can be. I ask you to fully support this motion.
Okay, if there's no other speakers in relation to motion 32, I put motion 32 to conference. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That motion is unanimously carried. We then move on to motion 33 in the name of INTO.
Good morning, everyone. Siobhan McElhinney from the INTO. I formally propose this motion. Education has been underfunded over the past 10 years. Head teachers and boards of governors have had to become more creative to make a budget cover all aspects to deliver an education which will meet the needs of every child in the classroom. This year, the rising costs of fuel are making principals make decisions on reducing heating and review cleaning costs. This is not good enough. The budgets have not had any increase to allow for the rise in oil, gas, electric. One principal has informed me they're now changing oil to be ordered every 2 months instead of every 4 months. The last oil bill was £10,000. We will soon be asking PTAs for oil vouchers to heat our schools. And yes, the former motion was saying we shouldn't be asking, but what are we to do? Children will learn better in a warm, comfortable environment, not sitting in a cold room with extra layers on. Our principals are exhausted trying to make this limited budget stretch. Normally, staffing accounts for the majority of the budget, but this increase in costs is impacting dramatically. Do we have teachers in class and classroom assistants, or do we have the heat on? Last week, a group of principals told me they're not comfortable with the constant pressure of managing a growing deficit. The stories being shared are not like the profit figures from the utility companies and the bonuses of the CEOs, but rather the minus figures are growing and growing. The fear going in front of a finance committee and explaining the school is growing deeper and deeper into the red. The media highlighted a need for 60% increase in budgets to cover this figure. Maybe there will be a Christmas bonus arrive in our school budgets, but I suppose I better wake up out of that deep sleep. We need to demand an increase in funding to ensure all children receive a first quality education. And I am fed up, folks, of these quiet conversations. We need to demand our education to be funded at a level which will ease the burden in our staff rooms. Why are we constantly questioning where we put a heater on or where we put the heater off? And this is impacting as well on our well-being. We see schools, I spoke to another principal, and they have had quite a number of staff off with colds and flus. This is impacting constantly on us all. When I am in my own classroom, I have single glazed windows, definitely trying to teach wrapped up like an Eskimo. Kids are sitting trying to write notes with gloves and scarves on because of a lack of investment in education. I do think we should ask our MLAs to stand in their classrooms longer than a photo opportunity. I ask members here to demand for an increase in funding to ensure all children are educated in a warm classroom without the need for excessive layers. Maybe an alternative would be perhaps we could hire out the rooms in Stormont. There's nobody using those at the minute. I urge you all to support this motion and start demanding more, because we need our schools to be funded in a way to meet the 21st century education, folks. Thank you.
Mary O'Shea, INTO, formally seconding this motion. Conference, the financial crisis schools are existing under is not a new story for the field of education. Schools, as my colleagues have said, have been struggling for the last 10 years to make ends meet, and school leaders have had to become more adept and creative in their financial management in order to protect the education provision in schools in what we can all see is a grossly underfunding of the education system. I'm a teaching principal myself, and it is a role in which I'm expected to fulfil the financial planning without the financial training. And it's something that I'm just supposed to make happen, to make work. And it takes me away from what is the core of my work of leading, teaching and learning in my school.
And schools have, through these years, made many difficult decisions and pared back the spending on all the added extras to a bare minimum in order to protect funding for staffing costs and the essential utility costs. We've kept the broken system working, and that needs to stop. Circumstances now move that beyond our financial planning capabilities, when up to 90% of our school budgets are already required for staffing costs. We have nowhere to move on what are increasing other costs. The time for the employing authorities to make significant changes to the current funding model has come once again to the fore. These escalating energy costs are not of our making at school, but they become our problem on a daily basis. There is a legal requirement for schools to provide a working and learning environment which ensures the health and safety of the workers, the pupils and the young people, and ensure that their education is not negatively compromised. However, the ongoing COVID mitigations alone cause implications for escalating costs. It's time now then for consideration to be given to an alternative way to manage these costs at centre level. They should be ring-fenced within budgets with a centrally funded allocation for the real school costs we are facing. Schools are a safe haven for many of our young people, and this ongoing cost of living crisis means much more in the context of families being challenged to choose between heating and eating. For them, time spent in school could take away that burden, and particularly in light of what colleagues were calling for in the previous motion, supporting funding for free school meals for all. This would ensure that parents and guardians would at least know the children are warm and fed when they are at school. For this to happen, school budgets need adjustments. The budgets have never been linked to inflation. The rising costs have been voluntarily offset when school leaders meet with their LMS officers at EA and then are subsequently accepted by boards of governors at the school sign-off stage. But the EA itself is facing a serious degree of financial risk and a rising budget deficit of £300 million. But despite this, we need guarantees at school that the employing authorities are going to act collectively to advocate for schools and that the unprecedented costs we are facing. We need a plan to be put in place and communicated to schools in a timely manner, and we need that action now. The ongoing implications of this if this is not the case, may result in school closures due to falling room temperatures, reductions in staffing levels, or reduction in the teaching hours available to schools. This is broadly reflective of practice being considered in England in many schools in order to save money there. There is nowhere else for schools to move to, and if the current common formula funding model is maintained, we face many testing and trying times to come. I urge you to support this motion and provide protection to the educational standards in our schools despite the financial crisis we are facing. Thank you.
Morning Conference. Noreen Robinson, Unison, supporting motion 33. Conference, this is a clear and important motion. As support service workers in education, we are appalled at least last week's announcements of the $300 million deficit in the education sector. We fully expect to have real challenges and cuts that this motion points out. We will resist. We will fight to keep the heat on and our pupils fed. We stand together with the teachers' unions. Their agenda is our agenda. We will join with you in bringing the issues to our bargaining table. Conference, please support this motion.
Okay, thank you very much. If there's no other speakers, I'll put motion 33 to conference. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That motion is carried. If I could then move to motion 34, and that's the motion that was circulated on the yellow page, the one that was omitted from the publication. Thank you.
Eileen Gorman, President of the Financial Services Union, moving motion 34. General Secretary, Chair, and delegates. There's nothing more certain in the retail banking sector than change. We're told every day by the banks that things must change to meet the needs of the customer. They say customers do not use cash anymore, they do not use their local branch, and they want to do everything online. The FSU and its members are not against change, but we're in favour of managing change. We want change to benefit workers as well as customers. We want change to make working in the banking sector a rewarding and fulfilling experience. Telling us that customers do not want access to cash is the bank's way of justifying the removal of counter services and ATMs. Telling us that customers do not use their local branch is a cost-cutting exercise to boost profits and lower overheads. Telling us customers want to do all their banking online is a way of cutting staff numbers. Let us be clear, none of this change is done for the benefit of workers, the workers that we represent. If we leave managing change solely in the hand of the banks, there'll be no protections for the staff or customers. As a trade union, the FSU will not stand idly by and see the downgrading of a sector for the benefit of the few. We want a sector that has chosen a chosen career path for many, and a sector where change is managed and regulated. We want a sector where staff and customers have a real say in the future of banking. And that is why the FSU proposed a banking forum both in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We welcome the initiative of the Minister of Finance in Northern Ireland, Conor Murphy, who held a roundtable discussion in 2022 involving relevant stakeholders in the financial sector. We were part of that. And we welcome the banking review currently happening in the Republic of Ireland. Both of these reviews were called for by the FSU because we believe strongly that a new form of stakeholder banking is the best way forward for the sector. And that's why we propose this motion today. A motion that calls for the suspension of branch closures until at least 2025, that looks for just reward for staff and protects the interest of the customer, that calls for legislation to guarantee access to cash for customers and communities, and one that promotes regulation for eliminating ATM charges. And I ask for your support today. Thank you.
Mark Ashby, Financial Services Union, and I formally second this motion. There are a few trends currently occurring in the retail banking system: the closure of branches, the selling of ATMs to private companies, and the removal of services from communities across Northern Ireland. As my colleague, FSU President Eileen Gorman has just said, FSU are not against change. But when change occurs, we need to ensure that staff and customers are protected and supported, especially the elderly and the vulnerable. Equal Pay Day was last Monday, and we need to do so much more to close the gender pay gap. Publication of the data would be a start. Legislation in GB and in the Republic of Ireland requires firms of a certain size to publish this information in their employments. So political leaders in Northern Ireland need to make a clear statement. They will support new legislation to make the publication of gender pay gap data a legal requirement. I ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Jill? Jill Weir, Unison. I've just decided to come up, so I've no speech. Personally speaking, one of my children works in a bank, and one of her first jobs recently was to close 5 Mile Town Bank. We in a rural area, it's not just our hospitals that are under attack, it's our banks. I think now Enniskillen is one of the few places that actually have physical banks in County Fermanagh. It is our elderly, it is our vulnerable, because I also have family maybe with mental health problems, who don't have phones, who don't use the internet, and they're at risk as well. So it is very important, these forums, I do agree with you, suspend all closures. We have been hit quite badly in Fermanagh and Tyrone with closures. My daughter, it broke her heart
when people came in and said, what am I to do now? What do I do now? Because we don't have the buses, we don't have the same infrastructure for them to get into a town. Usually to us, bankers is a bad word, but they're human, the workers, it's the workers we need to protect. So I fully support this. And I think maybe I'm the last speaker now on the motion.
Yes.
So Fermanagh gets the last say, so thank you very much for being here.
Okay, thanks very much, and that's fitting that Fermanagh got the last word. Could I put motion 34 at the conference? All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? That motion is unanimously carried. Okay, if I could then move and put section G of the report to conference, but first of all, is there anyone who wishes to speak on section G? If not, then I put section G of the report to conference. All those in favour? Against? Okay, that's adopted. Thank you very much indeed. In relation also then, I have to put section H to conference. Any speakers on section 8, industrial relations? No speakers then. Can I put section H of the report to conference? Great, thank you. Yesterday, at the start of conference, we had section A, which was obituaries and introduction. And it was only yesterday during the time that Paddy was chairing, I was sitting at the back of the conference hall looking out over the beautiful scenery here. And it came into my head that Barney Lawn, who was a PCS activist and had just recently retired, unfortunately lost his life in tragic circumstances here in County Fermanagh in August of 2021. So I just think it would be appropriate, particularly since we're in County Fermanagh, and any of you who knew Barney, he would have certainly entertained us all last night in the bars with his guitar. So I think we should note that under section A as well, and send our heartfelt sympathies to his family who live in County Fermanagh. So I just wanted to add that in. I'm now going to move to fraternal greetings from Ros Foyer, the General Secretary of the Scottish TUC, and we have that online.
Greetings, President and Congress. Very sad not to be joining you in person this year, but sadly our diaries just haven't allowed for it. I don't think the STUC has ever been more busy in terms of supporting our members in struggle, and there's an unprecedented level of industrial action taking place here in Scotland right now. Workers across our economy have had enough. They're demanding better, and they're taking action in the face of our government's inaction, and trade unions are leading the way in this working class fight back. So my thanks to ICTU for allowing us to convey our greetings by a recording. And let me start by bringing you a message of solidarity from our President Pauline Rourke of the Communication Workers Union, who's herself leading industrial action within BT right now, and the wider General Council of the Scottish Trade Union Congress, many of whom have also been leading actions across a range of key sectors. During these tumultuous times, the trade union and labour movement, through our trade union centres, has continued to support one another with regular updates and with both digital and in-person meetings to meet the extreme challenges of our times head on. Just weeks ago, we hosted over 50 women from across the Council of the Isles at our new Scottish headquarters, and I very much welcome the close working relationship that we've developed with ICTU, with the other trade union centres, and with ICTU's affiliates. And on that note, I'd like to wish your outgoing General Secretary, Patricia King, our very best regards and good wishes on her retirement. Patricia has been a big inspiration and encouragement for me during me taking up my own role here in Scotland. And I'd also like to wish your new General Secretary, Owen Reedy, all the very best in taking on the General Secretary role going forward, particularly in these hugely challenging times. Owen's a good friend to the STUC and he's held in high regard by comrades across Scotland, and we very much look forward to working with him in his new role. And I think it's fair to say from the top of this contribution that the challenges we're facing right now with the cost of living emergency have seldom been more acute in a period of what you can only describe as great economic and political turmoil. We understand that as well as dealing with all of the issues that our members are facing, ordinary workers in Northern Ireland are facing what can only be described as a vacuum where government should be taking the hard decisions. And across the board, you're still dealing with the very real and potentially dangerous ongoing ramifications of Brexit and the Good Friday Agreement. And let me assure you that in these hugely challenging times, the STUC recognises that it's crucial that we put working class solidarity at the very heart of all our campaigns and do not allow hatred to divide our class. We also right now realise that we need to call out the Westminster Tory government for their complete and utter failure to protect the UK's most vulnerable citizens and address the difficult issues being faced across our Isles. But when it comes to our own Scottish Government, while recognising that they're at least making decisions and willing to get in the room and engage with trade unions on our economic demands, we're very clearly sending them a message too, demanding that they have to do more, move faster and go further in their protection of our most vulnerable citizens. Because Scotland still has an endemic issue with low pay. In 2021, Skills Development Scotland's figures showed that almost half of all working adults were bringing home an income of less than £15,000 an annum, with less than a third on more than £25,000. And faced with inflation, travel costs, housing costs, utilities costs and food costs that have all skyrocketed, far too many families are now facing an unsustainable future as living standards have dropped at the fastest rates since records began and inflation has reached double figures. And yet, after 10 years of austerity and real terms pay cuts, their levels of pay remain hugely undervalued. Meantime, the wealth gap continues to grow and the rich are getting richer. The FTSE 100 chief executives saw their pay rise by an average of 39% last year. The top 1% who earn over 170,000 saw their pay go up by just under 10%, while the 10% of workers in the lowest incomes, who are disproportionately female, only got a rise of just over 1%. This tells you all you need to know about the systemic inequalities that exist in our economy. And then they have the energy companies who are set to make 170 billion out of us all in the next 2 years. And all of the other privateering parasites who are literally sucking the profits out of our economies and making us pay through the nose for what are essential public services. They don't just need to be taxed properly, they need to be nationalised and their profits used for the benefit of the people to make our economy and our society fairer for all. In these conditions, where the economy is failing workers and where the politicians have failed to come up with the protections that ordinary working people need, is it any wonder that workers on the ground have taken matters into their own hands? I don't think so. And let me tell you, organised workers are in the vanguard of this fight back. We've come together, we're saying enough is enough, we're taking action, we're fighting back to demand pay justice, and we're winning. You just have to look at the extra 600 million that Industrial Action got into our local government settlement after the pay dispute that took place there in Scotland earlier this year. And across Scotland in recent months, we've seen workers across our transport sectors, in BT and our postal services, in the HE and FE sectors, in local government, in our health services, in our schools, our civil service, and across so many other areas, all standing up and balloting for action to protect their pay and conditions, but also to protect our services. We know we deserve a decent standard of living and we're prepared to go out and fight for it. Meantime, as the crisis deepened over the summer, the UK government was missing in action. And looking back now, I wish they'd stayed missing in action, because the damage done to our economy by the Truss government's mini budget based on extreme right-wing fantasy economics was unforgivable, and millions of ordinary people will suffer the long-term impacts of their reckless and shameless choices. They managed to do the polar opposite of what was required. They turned a pending emergency into a complete economic disaster. And the latest captain of the sinking ship, Rishi Sunak, will still feed wealth to the rich and prop up his billionaire pals in the city while bringing back an agenda of cuts and austerity to yet again try and make us pay for their mess. And it's clear that they will continue attacking workers' rights and protections as hard as they can, and they will use the politics of hatred to do all they can to split our class and turn worker against worker. So we need to make it loud and clear to them. We've done austerity 10 years ago. It didn't work then, and it won't work now. We refuse to be poor anymore. We demand an economy that works for workers. They have no mandate for their policies, and we are demanding an immediate general election so that the people can have their democratic say on how we deal with this mess. And we will not rest until we have kicked every last part of this rotten Westminster Tory government out of power. And to all workers across our aisles, our message must continue to be clear. Your fight is our fight, your struggle is our struggle, and wherever people are taking action to fight back against economic or social injustice, the whole trade union movement will be behind you. To secure a fairer economy, working class people need to forget our differences. We need to put our arms around each other, and we need to act together, because when we do that, our collective power works, and that is what those in power most fear. The real fight back will happen in our workplaces and our local communities, and over 80% of strikes result in a win. That's union power, that's collective power, and that is people power. And to our Scottish Government, looking to plan next year's budget and also to hold another referendum at some point in the future, we are piling on the pressure. We are giving them a call to action and telling them it's time to prove themselves. We're saying you're faced with a choice. Now is the time to pull out all the stops, to do everything you possibly can within your existing suite of powers to show the people that you're on their side. If you want to protect the Scottish economy, gain the trust of Scotland's people, and support local economic activity, you need to be putting money into the pockets of those who need it most, and that means more money into workers' pockets. We shouldn't have to undertake industrial action to get serious pay offers in line with inflation on the table. Nobody wants to strike, and it's not embarked upon lightly. But they must not underestimate the fact that our members are angry, they're prepared to fight and fight hard for the decent pay and living standards that they fully deserve. So for next year's budget, I say to them, treat this as the humanitarian emergency that the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, correctly called it. Use your budget to raise revenue from where the wealth is in our economy, tax the rich, tax wealth, divert that wealth to those in most need. The Scottish people will understand the need for such measures in such times, but they will not forgive or forget any so-called left of centre government that fails to stand up to the Tories and look after its citizens in their time of need. That's why last month, as part of our Scotland Demands Better campaign, we launched the People's Plan for Action. This plan has 9 key demands that we want to see reflected in the 23-24 budget, and it will form the basis of a petition to Parliament that we're mobilising people across Scotland to get behind, to demonstrate a high level of public and civic Scotland-wide support for these measures. Already the plan has the support of Scotland's trade unions, the Poverty Alliance, Living Rent, Engender, NUS Scotland, Commonweal, Close the Gap, Friends of the Earth Scotland, the SNP's trade union group, the Scottish Green Party, Get Glasgow Moving and the Scottish Pensioners Forum. And our demands are for a real pay rise for all public sector workers, a social security system that targets further and loosens the grip of poverty, warm homes through municipal energy companies, sustained action to tackle rent costs, sharing our wealth through income, wealth and business taxes, universal free school meals, cheap, publicly controlled public transport, more support for childcare and enforcement of their Fair Work agenda. All things which lie within their current powers. So as you can see, the key demands within our plan are closely aligned to some of the key priorities on your own agenda. And by shouting and standing together with one strong voice, we're determined that this winter we'll get real action, not just warm words delivered by our government in Scotland. So in closing, Chair, I just want to touch on a couple of final points. As some of you might know, this year marks the STUC's 125th anniversary. And as I mentioned last year, our first secretary was an amazing woman. She was a trade union organiser and suffragist named Margaret Irwin. And I'm proud that this year, when we opened our new purpose-built trade union centre in Bridgeton, we were able to name our new headquarters the Margaret Irwin Centre, which will create a lasting legacy in her memory. And of course, we know that women and women's struggles have always been at the heart of our movement, but are often not highlighted. And so it's great to see that our 125th anniversary book, Mon the Workers, contains many stories of women's struggles, as well as their wider struggles, both at home and abroad, from the past, present and future. And these stories of our past have filled me with pride and optimism. They've shown me that it's often when things have been at their worst that our movement has risen best to the challenges we face. And I hope that by celebrating and highlighting the progress made in the past, we can help workers draw strength, inspiration, and the confidence that they need right now for the battles ahead, from the many, many victories that we've won, from securing the hour working day to the post-war New Deal for workers, the creation of the NHS and the welfare state, from the UCS working to a role in the anti-apartheid movement, from the anti-poll tax movement that started the downfall of Thatcher to the Good Friday Agreement and successful campaigns for a Scottish Parliament, and on so many other occasions where organised labour across our islands has played a key role in changing the course of history and improving working class people's lives for the better across Britain and Ireland. So yes, there are very difficult and dark times ahead for our movement and our class, but I'm optimistic because working class people are ready for the fight back. We're standing together, we're saying enough is enough, and we're demanding a workers' economy. We all know it won't be easy and we won't win every battle ahead. That's why they say it's not a struggle for nothing. But I've got no doubt that through our campaigns in workplaces and our communities, real progress is going to be made for workers in the immediate period ahead. And our movement's greatest chapters have yet to be written, because history shows us again and again that when we come together, our people power is irrepressible. Solidarity, comrades, and thank you.
Oh, okay. We're nearly there, conference. Just a few other announcements.
I've been asked to announce to conference on Saturday, the 26th of November, Reclaim the Night March. People should meet at 5:30 at Riders Square in Belfast, and there'll be speeches at 6 and then a march around the city. And this launches the start of 16 days of action against gender-based violence organised by Reclaim the Agenda. So if you can make it to that, that would be very helpful. Also, we have, I think, at least 2 unions on further strike action this week. UCU strike dates are tomorrow, Thursday and Friday of this week, and Wednesday the 30th of November next week. And all unions and activists would be welcome on the picket line. So again, if you can make it, and the picket lines will be at Ulster University, Queen's University, and I think St Mary's College, and that's the first time at St Mary's. So we wish UCU well in their dispute. And also to remind, I think Erin Massey did say from the rostrum yesterday that the Royal Mail, our posties, are out on strike again, the same dates as UCU, Thursday and Friday of this week and following Wednesday, and then there's other dates into December. So again, if you can support your postie and Royal Mail members in any way, that would be much appreciated by those unions. I just want to move into the close of conference to thank a number of individuals. Conference Arrangements Committee, thank you very much, ensuring that the motions were all grouped together and that we got through the business of conference, and we've got through the business of conference in a very timely fashion. And so I want to thank the Conference Arrangements Committee for an excellent job. Also, I want to thank the tellers, and that was Archie, Samantha, Rachel and Noreen. However, if we were paying you by the hour for actually doing any work, thankfully you weren't required, but thank you very much for volunteering, because it is an important role if we get into where there's split votes. I want to thank the hotel staff, John and Aidan, I think it is. Oh yeah, John and Aidan for organising, they're the conference organisers and the hotel staff. But also I think we should thank all of the staff working in not just this hotel, but the other hotels in Enniskillen. You know, those people who prepare your breakfast, prepare your meals, serve them, and also the staff who make our beds and do our rooms. They all did an excellent job. So particular thanks to hotel staff. And conference. I think certainly when we turn up at conferences, we just think, oh, we turn up and it all happens and without much work going on behind the scenes. However, particularly because of COVID, this hotel was booked, rescheduled, and I think twice was rescheduled. So there was, I think, a fair bit of negotiation had to go on between Congress staff and the hotel because we were able to carry over. So I want to particularly thank the Congress staff and the organisation of this conference, but not just that, for all of the work they have done throughout the last 18 months while I've been chair. They've always been there. Well, it didn't matter whether when you phoned them, they were always there and always extremely helpful. And if they didn't have the instant answer, they found out and they came back to you. So thank you very much to what is a relatively small team in the Belfast office. So thanks very much, Owen, to you and all the team in the Belfast office for all the support that they have given to me and to the NIC over the last 18 months. But I think the most important people in the room today are you, the delegates. And I think the debate has been excellent. It has been fraternal, and we have got through the business in a very fraternal way. In some ways, some people were saying, oh, if we could get a bit of argy-bargy going, you know, that's also part of conference. But I want to thank all the delegates for being here on time, and for dealing with the business of conference and making my job very easy in chairing the conference. So
Thank you all and hope you have a safe journey home. Also, I want to thank, there's a number of guests and I'm not going to list them all, to guests and observers at our conference. I hope you've enjoyed the conference and I hope you've also learnt from the conference, and some of you maybe will be back in future years as delegates to the conference and up at the rostrum speaking. So thank you very much indeed. One other group I want to thank, and that's the outgoing NIC, is that I would have to say probably 99% of the meetings were conducted via Zoom. So sitting in your house doing Zoom meetings, it just isn't the same. But I have to say they've made my job extremely easy in chairing the meetings. Maybe it wouldn't have been so easy if we had all been in a room, but I think it was fairly straightforward. And where we had differences, and we wouldn't be trade unionists if we didn't disagree sometimes, we always managed to get to a position that we all supported. So I want to thank the other 16 members of the NIC for making my job as chair fairly straightforward. And I have certainly enjoyed that period of time, and I want to thank the trade union movement and the NIC for giving me the opportunity to chair a conference. So thank you very much indeed. So I'm just going to hand over to Owen, who's asked.
We're nearly there.
Oh, sorry. Very, very, very important. I forgot to mention, all of this, the AVs, particularly when we had people joining remotely. So I want to thank the AV staff, because all of this just happens and we don't sometimes appreciate all the work that was in, not just at conference, but before. So thanks very much, Darrell and Stephen. Thank you.
Last bit of business to do, but a very important bit of business. I'm going to ask Jerry Murphy and Patricia McKeown to come up and propose and second the vote of thanks for our outgoing chair, respectively. Jerry.
Good morning, conference. It's my very pleasant task. I've come to this microphone and others like it for about 30 odd years now for a variety of reasons, and this is one of the most pleasant reasons to be at a microphone here. I'm formally proposing on behalf of you, the trade union movement, and the 16 people that Alison referred to as the Northern Ireland Committee, and indeed the ICTU executive, a vote of thanks to Alison Miller. Alison Miller, as you will have gleaned over the years and will have had reinforced for you over the last couple of days, is a lovely person. Mother to Emma, partner to Chris, and a brilliant trade unionist, and I'm proud to say a friend of mine and all of you, by the way. Alison joined NIPSA in 1978. She gave 43 years of service to that organisation and 43 years of service to our movement. She progressed through the ranks of NIPSA while simultaneously progressing up the ranks of ICTU. She succeeded to the leadership of NIPSA, becoming the General Secretary Designate in November of 2015 and General Secretary proper in January of 2016. In doing so, she joined a pantheon of great trade unionists: McCusker, Corey, Campfield, and now to that we can add Miller. People we can all aspire to be. Her tenure as General Secretary wasn't an easy one. She took over the leadership in 2016, leadership proper in 2016, in the midst of a decade of austerity. The leadership she provided not only to NIPSA, but to the trade union movement as a whole over that period of time, I appreciate greatly, and I know so many of you appreciate it too. She led her union through that period with great skill and dexterity. It wasn't easy. It still isn't easy. But she showed us a pathway through at that point in time, And I, for one, am particularly grateful for that. At ICTU, she was always available to help and support. She was particularly good at providing the quiet word of advice when it was needed. Her skill in that respect, I think, is completely underestimated by this movement. It's something I, in particular, will miss. She has provided representation for all of us on various bodies other than ICTU. In particular, her work at the LRA has to be commended and also remembered by all of us. What she did at the LRA, at the round table, is something which all of our members will benefit from in the years to come. Alison, thank you. It's been an honour and a pleasure to serve with you. And on behalf of us all, I hope you enjoy many happy years in the next phase of your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Conference, Patricia McKeown, Unison, and NIC. And it's my pleasure to be able to second the vote of thanks to Alison. Votes of thanks are always very scary because you get the opportunity to embarrass people. I can officially confirm to all of you that Alison Miller has no skeletons in her cupboard. What I want to do is pay my respects to the work she has done. Alice and I first had an official engagement with each other 20 odd years ago, and it was a big fight. It was conducted by correspondence, and to this day, I cannot remember what it was about. But after that, we have worked as colleagues for many, many years. Two sister unions who should be working as colleagues together. And it's been a pleasure to do that with Alison and with her predecessors in NIPSA. Chairing the Northern Ireland Committee, holding office in Congress is not that easy. First of all, it's a great honour for your union that your peers from other unions have elected you to serve in that position. It's a voluntary position. Alison has served us for a number of years now as the Vice President of the whole Congress, and then over the last 18 months as the Chair, but before that, Vice Chair of the Northern Ireland Committee. So you're talking about many years holding that elected position on behalf of all of us. And none of that is easy when you're also, for the best part of that, doing your day job, doing what you have to do in your own union. So the call on your time and the impact on your personal life, it can be fairly dramatic and it can be very stressful. And while Alison has said very kind things about the Northern Ireland Committee, come on, we're a stroppy bunch. And we don't agree on everything. And yes, we might have been saved by being online for a good part of the last year or so. Doesn't stop us. Being online doesn't stop us having arguments. Being together doesn't stop us having arguments. But she has particular skills, and Jerry has alluded to them, particular skills at pouring oil on troubled waters. And that's a really, really important thing to be able to say about the person who's leading the movement in that position. Doesn't always happen that way, but it has been particularly important. Alison has represented us. It's not just about chairing the official meetings of the Northern Ireland Committee. It's also about that link between us as NIC and the main executive in Dublin and the Secretariat in Dublin. And it's also about representing us, the face of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions in the North, out in the wider world with the other trade union congresses, and you heard reference to the Council of the Isles, with government, with more than one government, always the responsibility of the person who's leading a Congress to project that strong image of us. We are the Irish trade union movement. We are the northern bit of it. We are one Congress. We stand together, and Alison has been absolutely expert at getting that message across. And I really, really want to thank you for that. On the personal side, during that period, Alice and I swapped stories about the kind of care both our mothers then needed. Jockeying with that, as well as trying to do more than one job, is something that Alison has done. I still have my mum, thankfully. Alison does not. And that was a very sad occasion because I know how much she cared for and loved her mummy. And I want to say a personal thank you to Alison for the very kind things she has said about the man I love. It has, I'll be all right. It's meant a great deal, Alison. And I want to say a particular thank you to NIPSA for that, because I cannot tell you how touched I was that all 5 living NIPSA General Secretaries came to Harry's wake. It was a great honour. Thank you all very much. And Alison, thanks on behalf of all of us.
One final bit of business to do. And it's a small token of our respect and our esteem for Alison. I think we all want to associate ourselves with the comments from Jerry and Patricia. Patricia said Alison has no skeletons in her cupboard. I could tell a story or two. No. And I'm looking at Geraldine Alexander, but I'm told I shouldn't, because I'm told that discretion is very important. And that's a work in progress, by the way. That's something I'm going to have to learn very, very quickly, I believe. But anyway, we have a small token to present to Alison, but I just want to say I've known her for 6 years. We sat beside each other on the executive, which was always a bit of fun, because, you know, those meetings can be a little bit tiresome at times, of course. They won't in the future, of course. They'll be brilliant. But they'll be wonderful. I can assure you that. But sometimes they're a bit tiresome. But we used to have a bit of fun, a bit of crack. I've been on 1 or 2 trips with Alison as well. We went to the Welsh Trade Union Congress and to the Scottish Trade Union Congress. And I can also say she's good fun and a bit of crack. And there's a couple of stories there too. But again, discretion is important. So I won't, although perhaps maybe at another conference, you know, if people are prepared to buy me a beer or two, I might, you know, the lips could get looser. And I'm particularly looking at Geraldine down there, because we horrified her with a story or two last night. But you'll have to ask Geraldine about that. But on a serious note, the one thing I can say about Alison is she is a fine human being. She's a really, really good person. And I know from getting to know her, when she worked at NIPSA, it was all about the members. Never about her ego, all about the members. And, you know, I consider her a good friend, and we're going to keep in touch. And I'd just like you to come up here, Alison, because we have a bunch of flowers for you. And we just want to wish you every success and happiness in the next phase of your life. We don't want you to be a stranger. You're very much part of our movement. You've been a wonderful leader, and we love you very much. There you go.
Thank you.
You might want to say a few words to her. I'm going to take that there.
Okay, those skeletons in the cupboard and stories. I have as many stories on Owen, so I said if he dared mention any of them, that I would embellish mine even more. So I know he told Geraldine some of them last night, but Geraldine Alexandra and I have been friends from we were mere children, I think, in the trade union movement. So Geraldine, I know, will have my confidence. I don't recognise necessarily the person that people, and thank you very much for those very kind words. Obviously, if I joined NIPSA in 1978, child labour was still in place. Through those 43 years in NIPSA, I had many people who mentored me through those years and supported me. And I never thought the day that I walked through the door in 1978 as a mere child at 17 that I would end up as General Secretary, and it was the biggest privilege of my life when union members in my union elected me into that position. Didn't always get it right. Sometimes it was wrong. Sometimes there was arguments, but sure, isn't that just how we are as trade unionists? And then I remember a day I got a phone call, I think it was from Anne Speed, asking me to stand as Vice President of Congress. And Unison wanted to nominate me. I didn't think that that was something, really, that was really within my grasp and reach. But anyway, anybody who knows Anne and Patricia, they don't give up. They phoned me relentlessly, and I eventually agreed to that. And suppose in the greatest tradition, I would have ended up at some point maybe President of Congress. But at that point in time, in NIPSA, we were going through a fair bit of turmoil, and that wasn't a road that at that time my union was able to release me to do that. But I want to thank Unison in particular for giving me that privilege and honour to be Vice President of Congress. So thank you very much, Patricia, for giving me that opportunity, because it was a fantastic learning experience and certainly gave me people I could talk to, people I could confide in. Whenever sometimes things just get tough and you're just not sure what road to travel. So thank you very much to Unison for that nomination at the time. This is a sort of watershed moment for me, because while I retired from my union, nearly a year ago, and this conference was to be in March, so I thought it would be a fairly short time. In some ways it's been good, in some ways I've sort of thought, but anyhow, I have absolutely thoroughly enjoyed my time as chair. The comradeship I've had with all of you has been very supportive, and it would have been much better if we'd had a government in place for most of that time. It was in and out, hokey cokey. But thank you very much for making my time in the trade union movement good. I haven't given up. I've taken up some voluntary work, and I think I can't quite believe that this is the end of my trade union sort of role, but I can guarantee you I will be at picket lines, and I'm here to support you, because once a trade unionist, always a trade unionist. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, so that's conference formally closed. Safe home, everyone, and hope you, not quite sure where the next conferences be, but I'm sure many of you'll be here. Thank you. Sorry. The Fringe meeting, can somebody tell me, have you been able to manage to bring it forward, the time, or is it still 1:30? Paddy, do you know if we've been able to bring forward the Fringe?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think they make their way now.
So if you could I understand, yes. So if you can make your way now to the Devonish room for those going to the TUFP Fringe meeting, thank you.